Welcome to Women, Sweet on Women, Black Lesbian Film Festival. ZAMI NOBLA is thrilled to work with Out on Film and Sisters in Cinema in partnership with Third World Newsreel, Black Lesbians United, Beyond Bold and Brave, AARP Georgia, to host our very first virtual mini film festival commemorating the life and legacy of warrior poet Audre Lorde and centering the work of Black lesbian filmmakers. My name is Mary Ann Adams, founder and executive director of ZAMI NOBLA, National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging, deeply rooted in Atlanta, Georgia, with state chapters in California, North Carolina, and Oregon. We are committed to building a base of power for Black lesbians over the age of 40, living anywhere in the country. We center service, advocacy, and community-engaged research. Please visit us at www.zaminobla.org. It is my distinct pleasure today to introduce the Talkback with Dr. Jennifer Abbott and Shadra Pittman. Let me introduce them, and then I will turn this over to the two of them. All right, here we go. An award-winning filmmaker and documentarian, Dr. Jennifer Abbott was a radio broadcaster for 19 long years. She hosted and produced news, features, live talk shows, documentaries, and special programming on public and commercial radio in Connecticut, Philadelphia, and Boston. She was the first woman in Connecticut to host a nightly AM radio talk show, The Jennifer Abbott Show. She is an American feminist, activist, and award-winning media producer. Abbott holds a PhD in intercultural media education and women's studies. As a feminist, activist, and professor, Abbott was part of the dawning of the second wave of feminism in the U.S. Dr. Jennifer Abbott. Shadra Pittman is the vice chair of ZAMI NOBLA and founder and executive producer of the Sankofa Projects, where she works to preserve the legacy of the African diaspora and forever end violence, end rape, an activist organization that seeks to end sexual violence globally while advocating for deaf and LGBTQI inclusion. She serves on the Norfolk Botanical Gardens President's Council for Inclusion and Diversity and the Southeast Care Coalition for Environmental Justice. In its 10th year, this June, she will host Sankofa's Remembrance Day, which is the only Middle Passage ceremony in coastal Virginia which honors the millions of Africans who died during the transatlantic slave trade. Shadra Pittman, take it away.
Thank you, Mary Ann Adams. Thank you. Dr. Abbott.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
It is so wonderful to see you. It is so wonderful to have you here as a part of the Women's Suite on Women Film Festival. Truly an honor, I have to say. You know, say again?
I said likewise.
Oh, wonderful. You know, so I was reading up on you because that's just what needs to be done, your work. And I saw that in February 16th, which is really interesting, that's 5 years from today, there was an article that was put out in Press Telegram about you and Dr. Bowen. And one of the things that was said, which I thought was so beautiful, it said, Dr. Jennifer Abbott has loved Angela Bowen for 35 years, and that the passionate pursuit of Angela Bowen, which follows the life of the Black lesbian feminist activist who also happens to be her wife and partner of 36 years, is also a love letter. So being that we are coming out of Valentine's Day, as we were talking before, we're in Black History Month, Zora Neale Hurston said that love makes your soul crawl out from its hiding place. So how did Dr. Bowen do that for you?
Oh my goodness. So I'm not going to cry because it's a Zoom, but that was such a beautiful introduction. And I certainly don't remember half the things I've done at this stage in my life, or what's been done about us. But yeah, how, I think the question is, let me see if I got the question right.
Yes.
How did Angela Bowen open up my heart? Was that
Open,
what you asked?
well, open up your heart. I mean, I know that when you were introduced, Marianne spoke about your work in broadcasting and that you were already an out feminist. You were out as a woman of Jewish faith, but you weren't out as a lesbian. So how did she help you crawl out from that?
Crawl out.
Place?
Holy cow. So Angela, at the age of 42, I think it was 41 or 42 that I met her. I met her in 1979.
Mm.
And in 1979, I was doing my talk show, the Jennifer Abbott Show.
Yes.
And she had been running the school, the Bowen Peters School of Dance in the inner city of Boston, and influencing, unknown numbers of Black children and some white children who were brave enough to come to that school, and influencing an entire community, about Black culture. It was right behind Yale University when they came in 1963. And they found it right in the middle of the Black community on Dixwell Avenue. I want that name changed to the Bowen Peters School, Bowen Peters Street. I really want, I don't know how to do it.
Oh, it can be done.
But they brought Black culture to New Haven, right? It was the civil rights struggle. That was what the civil rights struggle was all about, is culturally, because she was a dancer. She was an artist, and she loved children. So how did she shape? Oh my God. Well, I had never really felt love like that before, which the kind of love that she gave to her children, I think it came from this unconditional location. Her mom was a single mom, and she was at 2 years old. Her father died, helping his wife to give birth to their last child, because he birthed all of the children in their house in Roxbury. Okay. But he died on the way to the hospital because the last child her head was so big, it was having trouble coming out. And it was the only child that he could not get out. And he was racing to the hospital and had a heart attack and died. And he was 2 years old when he died. She doesn't really remember her father. And she was born in 1936. So this was 1938. And this is Jim Crow time in the South. And it was what it was in Roxbury. Yes. But her mother recognized and saw Angela and gave her a sense of herself, allowed her to trust her own voice, and to determine for herself which way she was going to go. It was her mom. I did not have that kind of upbringing. So what I got from her was what she gave to all of her children, which was this, not uncritical, but unconditional love. Yes. So I never knew love before, and I had been in a relationship before, but I was 32 when I met Angie. Angie was 10 years older than I was. Okay. And I had a lot to learn. I thought I was anti-racist, but I didn't know a lot of stuff. I'm still learning, obviously. You can't help but learn right now. So she opened up my heart in every single kind of way that I can think of. I mean, she knew how to give, and she knew how to give to herself. That was what was incredible. She had an independent mind. She knew her own voice. She knew the shit that she had been through, up on Broadway, trying, when she was this prima ballerina at the Elma Lewis School of Dance, went off to New York City, tried to break into Broadway, Balanchine. They wouldn't handle a Black body up on their white stages. And they kept going back to those rehearsals, put on different clothes, and went back to those rehearsals. They didn't care. They knew that they were groundbreaking. And then when that didn't work, she went off to, Europe and did jazz train and danced. And then in 1963 opened up her school. So what does it teach me? The woman had resilience.
Yes.
The woman
like none other. Yeah.
still teaching me, because I'm now a widow. I mean, I don't know, there's no other way to describe that relationship at this point. I'm in relationship with her as a widow.
Of course.
So I'm still learning from her. And so I learned from her. I learned how to love. I learned how to grow. I learned how to begin to accept myself. It was, it changed my life and the course of my life. Everything that I did was because, I mean, as part of a movement before I met her, I felt I was already a cultural worker. That's how I saw myself. But when I met Angela, I also met Audre Lorde. I also met, the people that were Jackie Alexander and the people that Angela met and became and was able to lend my skills and my support because I knew what she was bringing to that struggle and bringing it out. I mean, she introduced Audre Lorde on some level to a wider audience because she saw herself as a warrior. She saw herself as part of the Audre Lorde army. So she wrote some of the very first reviews of Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider and other poetry books, whatever. She wrote the first dissertation about Audre Lorde. And I'm trying to preserve her legacy right now. That's what I'm doing at Spelman College. So, yeah, I mean, you asked the right question. You obviously opened me up by talking about love right away. So, okay, next question or whatever.
No, it's a beautiful answer. And thank you for being so transparent about that. Because in watching the film, and I've watched it numerous times, it's so touching. The kind of love that you shared, the kind of love that she had for the arts, the kind of love, as you said, that she had for the children. The way in which she was described by the dance, Miss Ella described her as fervent, that she did things in a wholehearted fashion. And I think that you really capture that beautifully in your film. So I just want to say that. The way in which you introduce her to many people. In the same way that you said she introduced Audre to a lot of people, you are still introducing her to the world, which is really beautiful. So her story will always be remembered and she will always be remembered. I wanted to ask you something about, you mentioned, and she also talked about her body and how she felt about her body. You also talked about, her being the Swan Queen and how when she was in that performance, she was a brown-skinned woman. And that was even something for her to be a brown-complected woman being in that role, prima ballerina. And, the relationship that she had with her body, she was so tall and she would hunch over. I saw a quote from Tony Bambara that says, "One forgot what it was to walk upright and see clearly, to breathe easy, to think better than was taught, to be better than one was presumed to believe." And so when I heard that quote, it made me think about how ballet helped her walk upright, but it introduced her to her whole world. It was her first love, right? You would say? Yeah. So how would you say that she felt about, clearly the arts moved her. The arts were very transformative in her life. How would you say that the arts affected her throughout her life? Because she was a scholar, she was an activist.
She was a writer also.
She was a writer. Yes.
And a reader. Library in my house.
I can imagine.
Oh my God. She read so much. I mean, I'm still reading, Claude McKay. I'm reading the poetry that she has in your original things.
Yes.
The original Audre Lorde stuff, the original stuff that by Beverly Guy Cheftel, the stuff, this house has the original things there. And she was reading so much and writing so much. She wrote when she was in high school. She had her first published piece. I think it was her first year of college. I think it was. She went to Emerson for 2 years and then she dropped out to go and dance in New York and Europe. And So the arts, oh my God, Paul Robeson, Marian Anderson. I mean, they had music in her house. Her mother always had music. She loved the classical music. I have some of those original records that she played. Alma Lewis, she choreographed dance while she stood at the kitchen sink dealing, you know what I'm saying? She had two children, a foster daughter that she rescued from abuse, and a stepdaughter that she rescued from abuse. Plus, she was dealing with all of the children and basically running the dance school.
Yes.
So she was, and reading and educating herself. But music, she loved music, and music saved her in her later years. I mean, one of the things that we shared was music, because I was a singer in a rock band.
Yes, you were. The liberation, right?
Yeah, and then changed into singing jazz, and so music was so fundamental to our relationship.
Yes.
And then when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was the music that spoke to her on a daily basis. So I would watch her sitting on the porch listening to Coltrane and Monk and whatever.
Wow.
Anything that had a melody and rhythms, she could follow it with her fingers and her body and her mind. When the mind was going, the music was speaking to her, and we danced, even when she was in a wheelchair, I would hold her hands up and we would dance. So, she was a creative being, and she stretched, she felt like she had the right to explore every part of her, including her brain. So when she got to go to, graduate school, in the film, you see how she,
yes,
story, but she explored as much as she could of everything else, her writing. We got her book published, which I did a beautiful job publishing and editing the book, but I'm not a good marketer. So her book, Out of the Blue, Alita's Stories is a wonderful group of short stories. Nobody knows about it. It's very painful to me. But she was a creative being. I'm a creative being.
Yes.
She was a brainiac. The difference between, there's some people who are just elevated in terms of their ability to have a vision and to also be able to express it and to have a complex, critical, nuanced view of things. For example, she wrote a critical review of womanism. Okay. She wrote a critical way of how people looked at Audre Lorde. She did not want people to put Audre Lorde up on a pedestal and just quote her quotes. She wanted to have a critical look at her book. And she had begun developing a book that didn't get done, which was a book of a critical approach to Lorde's work.
Wow.
Not just the adoration, not just the quotes, not just the hallelujahs, but the critical look at her work to be able to really handle it, which has yet to be done.
Yeah.
But Angela had already begun that process before it became difficult for her to make that happen. So she was one of those kind of people, those multi-talented, brilliant people who saw herself as a warrior and as a person in, trying to advance the idea of what it meant to be, an intersectional, because that's the word we use today.
Right.
It was intercultural in those early days, multicultural, having a very large vision of who was the in part. She had that vision that Audre did, and but also had this other arts background. She had these other things. She had her own sense of who she was and whatever, but also felt that she had the capacity to be not a bridesmaid, that's not the right word, but to be a vehicle to let the world know, and wasn't afraid to do it. It was Audre Lorde who helped, and Barbara Smith that kind of helped her become the chair of the National Coalition of Black Lesbians and Gays, which allowed her to have a national platform.
Right.
And then she took it and she went with it and she spoke. She did television and everything. She said it and spoke like you still don't hear people speaking.
No, you really don't. And that's one of the things that I really love about the film is that she is so outspoken. I mean, she is unapologetic. I love when you have a couple of clips of her in different interviews, and she talks very bluntly about the fact that she has a right to be here and that her existence matters. And being a Black woman, being a Black lesbian, being a mother, all of her identities matter. So she definitely, and also said that she spoke because there were many other people, other Black lesbians didn't have the ability to speak at that time. Yeah. Did you want to say something about that?
Oh, I was saying yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, and I think that's seeing what Audre was doing and realizing that Audre was out there on her own pretty much.
They're out there.
Yeah, and wanted to be a comrade to her and come out and speak to be another voice, which I think speaks to that whole collective nature of, right, sisterhood is powerful, right? So the more of us that are out and that are present, the better. You spoke about her love of music and your love of music. So let me ask you, I thought it was really beautiful how you began the film with "Let Me Love You Tonight." And then she starts singing, and how you capture her hands as if she's playing the piano, which was really beautiful. And then you end it with her singing again, singing "My Way" by Frank Sinatra.
And she did it, didn't she?
Yes, she did. She did it. She sang it. She added some pieces. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
She embodied that song.
She did.
She did. She embodied that song.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sayonara, Frank Sinatra. You have seen Angela Bowen sing that song. What nerve she had.
Well, clearly a lot of nerve. So why those choices? Why those songs?
Oh my God.
Were those her favorites?
Well, she introduced me to whose name I can't remember. Tell me.
Nellie Lucha?
Nellie Letter.
Nellie Letter. Uh-huh.
I would never have known. I mean, I would never know. When I heard her, oh my, "Let Me Love You Tonight."
Yeah.
That she played the piano and she sang the song and she sang it. I loved it. So it's it was like, "Let me love you tonight." I mean, that had to be.
Yeah.
It was, how am I going to start it otherwise? I don't know. I guess I was pretty bold myself. And what was the question?
with regards to the song, your love of music, her love of music, and just starting it with those and ending it with those songs, letting it be the bookends to your film music as a bookend.
Music is poetry, right? And who gets to be recognized in doing that music? That has a history too.
Yeah.
And I mean, in terms of racism and who gets known and who doesn't get seen and all of that, and what would we do without Black music? And also, Jewish composers who, were, I mean, in other words, the lack of, we're just beginning to see what we've already, many of us have known, is that, you take what you like and then leave out the rest of us.
Right.
You leave out the people we come from, or where we've been, or who we are.
Yeah.
And rip us off, and between Jews and Blacks, I mean, that was the whole thing, is that they were, on the one hand it was helpful, and on the other hand they were ripping off because they were white, and that's something we have to own, all of our parts of our legacies.
Right.
We cannot just cherry pick.
We don't get to pick and choose.
We don't get to do that.
No,
that's not right. That's really not right. But to be a human being and to be able to accept all of the vagaries, and the biases and the, how we survive, and how we do that by stepping on other people and over other people, as opposed to being with other people. That's all of our legacies. I mean, it's part of our culture, in particular in the capitalist society that we live in. We live in a different culture that might not have been the way that we were all brought up. We were all brought up that way here in the United States.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Priest Niemöller, one of the quotes that I always love that he says, he visited the concentration camps And he wrote a poem about it. And he said, when they came for the communists, I'm sure you're familiar with this, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. When they came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak up. And then at the end, he says, when they came for me, there was no one left. So this notion of being our brother and our sister's keeper, right? Making sure that all of us are invited in the room, that all of us have a space, that all of us have the ability to be heard, that all of our stories are shared, because we really collectively are richer when that happens. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but we do it too. There's so much to say about this particular topic.
Yes.
There's so much to say about this particular topic. That we've had to fight to have our names, our identities, and to name ourselves into existence. We had to name ourselves into existence. Okay. As Blacks, as lesbians, as Jews, as Native Americans, as whatever. And we're still doing that within our own progressive identities. We're still doing it. Without making space for others, there's a way that we can, there seems to me that there's a way that we erase the past by having new identities, as opposed to multiple identity names that identify us exist at the same time. Well, that's a better way to call yourself. You shouldn't call yourself this. You had to call yourself that. I don't know if I'm being too vague, but
no. But tell me more about that. No, because I think that's an interesting conversation when you're talking about.
I think that Angie, back in the day when she was here, I think that, and I don't know how she would be right now about it, but when we talked about the word queer, for example, and how that's a generational word, and I think, okay, every generation has to have a word to identify ourselves. Now, but I'm a lesbian. Okay?
Right.
And to say that, I had to make that word feel comfortable on my tongue. That did not feel comfortable in my mouth. That did not. Just like ZAMI, when we talked about how that was a pejorative name that Audre Lorde talked about, it took something to say that name.
Absolutely.
It took something to claim it, because there was so much silence along with that particular thing. I mean, I had every job that I had to deal with it. I had to deal with that silence until I couldn't take that anymore. Yeah. And changed my life, because I needed to not be silent anymore on the radio. I was a feminist, I was a Jew, but I couldn't be a lesbian on the radio. And when I went to some radio stations, they told me, don't even talk about feminism.
Wow.
So I left those blocks, and kept moving to different places. I got behind the scenes. I went to public radio to be a producer and to do all that kind of stuff, because I wasn't going to be an out person. I could not be myself as a talk show host at a certain point and hide the fact that I was also lesbian. And when I was doing that, it was too soon to do something like that. It was before Ellen. Well before Ellen. Yes. And people were already threatening me on the radio. They would call up. Oh yeah, they would call up during my show, and they talk about some little other thing, and they talk about one thing or another, and then they would sneak in. And Jennifer Abbott's a lesbian, and they had a 30-second delay in those days, so I had to click those things off, And after a while, it's like, oh, I can't do that. So there was no way to come out. I mean, I didn't have that emotional fortitude or a community, really, and which is what we need anyhow right now. To be able to keep stepping, Yeah. I have no idea where you started with that question.
No, but I love where it went though, because I think identities and being able to claim your own identity is so important. And I agree with you. Queer is now a term that is adopted by many people. A lot of people don't feel comfortable saying that they're lesbian. And so, but what is that about, right? That unwillingness to say the word, that unwillingness to claim that part of yourself. It's almost like Audre Lorde when she talks about underlining the parts of ourselves. We kind of scratch out parts of ourselves, depending on the job, depending on the family event that we're going to, depending on the church or the synagogue that we're in. We don't claim those parts of ourselves. And then are we really showing up as a full human being when we do that?
Right. And to name ourselves into identity, into existence is important. So the new labels like queer or other things, I don't find a problem. What I find a problem is don't create a new identity that erases mine.
Okay.
Don't do that.
Right.
You have to ask each other, well, why don't you want to be identified this way? Or why do you want to identify this way? Because that's how we learn about who we are and how we got to be where we are.
Yes.
That's why I'm doing this thing. I'm pulling together this poetry reading by lesbian widows. Well, there are a lot of women who are lesbian who've been married or with their partners that don't like the word widow because it's a heterosexual derivation that and we're just getting married now, and now we're dying.
Right.
And now we're losing our spouses. Well, I don't know if there's another language to how do you describe the fact, but it legitimizes. One day I was in a poetry reading. It was a mixed group of people, men and women, and I identified myself as a lesbian widow to this straight poetry reading, and they laughed because the concept of lesbian widow is the concept that we're even married to each other is still new, let alone lesbian widows. And they thought that I was being funny.
They thought that you were joking.
Yeah. So I said, well, and so I went on to describe, I had a 37-year partnership with a woman and was a caregiver for 8 years. So and she died 2.5 years ago. I'm a lesbian widow. So what it takes to identify and I'm different from other lesbian widows, and there are other women who have lost their partners that do not like that word at all.
Okay.
I don't even like the idea of, because you have to claim. So, but does that mean that we don't talk to each other? We don't learn about each other. We don't use that as an opportunity, like Audre Lorde said, to grow from our differences, to find out more about each other. Aren't you curious about why somebody would call themselves one thing and not another? Maybe when I'm gone, something else, a different terminology will come up because the whole notion of couples and all that kind of stuff are going to change drastically or whatever. It's the lack of ability to be flexible even within our own progressive movements. I think really very, very. It's the one thing that worries me right now. That identity is so important, but does identity mean to the exclusion of, and does it still mean that hierarchical thing? Well, that you're better than I am. Well, if you define yourself this way, then you're not that there. And how do you? If it doesn't unify us in our strength, then we have to question it. So I wish she was here. I wish Angie was here because I would love to know what she was thinking now. I knew how she was thinking before she died, but I don't know what in the middle of all of what we're going through. I don't know, and I feel cheated. Same as Audre Lorde.
I know.
But we have to just kind of carry on,
Let me ask you this. Do you think, while we're speaking of identity, just to ask you this, do you think it could be a combination of both and? So let's say someone says, I identify as a lesbian. I also identify as queer. Do you think the two can exist, can coexist? Or do you think that there should be more of a distinction of lesbian is its own entity?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think I've had enough conversations with people who are willing to really throw that around. I think that I think that we aren't talking to each other across generation and across those differences. I mean, that's what I would like to hear, those kinds of conversations.
I would too.
Not with slaps and hate and you this, and that, you're old and this, and you can't include me and all. How do you have a conversation to kind of, if it's an opportunity for conversation, if it's an opportunity to get to know each other across all these differences, I love that. I don't have an answer right now.
Okay. Yeah. Those are what I call the difficult but necessary conversations.
Yeah.
That's how we learn.
It
is.
If we see it that way.
Yeah.
Learn about, well, why do you feel uncomfortable with this? And can you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Can I see what you're saying? Or I don't. In other words, to know that the goal was to create a movement, to create larger communities, and then figure out what our responsibility is to each other in those communities.
Right.
Right now we need responsibility to each other. I mean, we're isolated, we're in Zooms, we're getting older, we're disabled, we're old, we're, dealing with things differently across race and class and age. And, we have to have conversations that I think help us to bind each other together. I think that Angela would say things like that. I mean, not as how I'm saying it. She would do it like you would really want to listen. But,
well, I want to listen to you. You're doing a great job.
She always spoke with love.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew even the stuff that you could hear her speaking, unless she was really ticked off like that when she
in the interview.
She's really ticked
Yeah,
off.
she was not happy. She was not happy. No, that was very clear. That was incredibly clear. Well, let me ask you something about generations, intergenerational work, because one of the things that I really love that you did in the film is that you allowed her students to speak about the impact that she had in their lives. So, you have Tina Bush, who wound up working for Alvin Ailey. You had Robin Wilson, who's now a judge, right? You have Treyer Price, who does the international water choreography and design in Dubai. Then you have, the other students who went on to get their PhDs and working in sexual assault.
All of them got the PhDs.
Well, see that? And so, here you have someone like Dr. Bowen, who is inspiring students, and then the students are inspired to go out and do the work. That must be really wonderful to see how they've gone from, being in her classes, her dance classes, and now they've taken on lives of their own.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to do this. Okay, yes.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
no, I was just going to say the intergenerational work, the fact that she thought that it was important to connect with her students, to teach her students, to show them what, activism could be. And what is it? Alice Walker says, activism is my rent for being on planet Earth. It's what I do. Okay. It pays for why I'm here. So could you speak a little bit about her students and her relation?
Well, Benny, who is in the film.
Yes.
You'll see him. He wanted to be a truck driver.
Yes, I saw that.
Is an assistant professor in Arizona. Amazing. And he teaches gender and queer.
Okay. Okay.
All right. If anybody's listening to this, he's the guy in the dress.
Yes.
Okay.
In the graduation. Yes, I saw.
Yes. Dina, who was crying, who was talking about that, is a healer in her community. Mm-hmm. She graduated from New Mexico, is a healer in her community. Roshni, who is a really good friend of mine. Fortunately, one of her proteges is starting a new. It's called Lavender Healing Therapy Collective here in Long Beach. Okay. And we've had this discussion about the name, about the queer and the lesbian, all that kind of, about how I thought that the queer is fine, but if you erase me as a lesbian, I would not come to that. And she said, well, that's really good information, she said.
Good.
Said, you can use it, but don't erase me in the process of it.
Right.
And so we had that great intergenerational conversation. Mm-hmm. She saw and took people who they were. 85, 92, 15, 5, 3. This was not something that she had a problem with. She was not ageist.
Yeah.
She was not a segregationist. She even talks about this, in the film. I'm not even sure that she did in the film, but she talked about how she thought that the white students who came to the school were really brave. Mm-hmm. She didn't have. It's not that she didn't see racism or she didn't see classism or anti-Semitism or anything. It's just that she took people. It's like with an X-ray vision. She looked at you. I had a friend of mine. I have a friend of mine who's a little, questionable. And and even during years when she had the Alzheimer's, we would sit. I have a picture of the three of us sitting on the couch, and Angela's looking at my friend like, she was just looking at her. I mean, she didn't have words at that point, but she knew what she was thinking.
Right.
Anyhow, I'm off again, but
no, I love it. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you mentioned Alzheimer's. My father had Alzheimer's and actually passed some years ago from it as well. And you said you were a caretaker of hers for many years. So how was that for your relationship? How did you manage, I would say? I mean, did you have support of friends that were able to, because that's important. I think, you know, especially in the time of what we're dealing with now with this pandemic and COVID and people not being able to see their loved ones and living in isolation. You know, one of the things that ZAMI NOBLA has done, which has been really beautiful, is to create opportunities for women to connect across the miles through Zooms, through film festivals, through different kinds of events. And so, so in speaking of support, what kind of support did you have, Dr. Abbott, during that time?
Not much. I had my friend Cynthia Rich, whose wife, Barbara McDonald. She and Barbara wrote that the first book about the relationship between sexism and ageism. Look me in the eye. Look us in the eye. The old, you know, and I made a film about that. Look in the Eye, Women's Project. So Cynthia had gone through it with Barbara.
Okay.
And she knew both of us, and loved both of us. And so it was really Cynthia Rich on the phone, because she was in San Diego, that helped me to say, basically, you need to find joy in every minute.
Absolutely.
So how do you do that? So that always was the question for me. How do I find joy in every minute? And so that was really critical. She told me, get a therapist. First thing.
Mental health is important.
First thing. Figure out the legal stuff as quickly as you can.
Absolutely.
And she talked, I mean, we talked a lot, you know, maybe once every couple of weeks or something, get a therapist. At that point, we'd been working so hard that we were up to that point that we really didn't have a very wide group of friends at all.
Okay.
And I had one friend who I made another film about, and that lasted for a little while. But in general, and I was dealing a lot with the caregivers, bringing them in and handling it. It was very hard.
Yeah.
It was, what can I tell you? But she was elegant, dignified, and her love of music, like I said, was a vehicle for the bridge between us.
Okay.
And, you know, all that was left really of that fabulous, brilliant brain was her spirit. And you know, she had spirit, and that's
spunk
always there.
Yes.
Up to the very end. And she knew me till the very end. We shared a dance at the very end. So
really?
Yes, we did. This is some of where all this poetry is coming from, is you know, why I'm doing this thing, the Lesbian Widows Poetry, because that you know, like Audre Lorde says, you know, poetry helps give name to the nameless so it can be thought. Well, that's what it's been for me. So I would say that the poetry also helped me to try to, you know, handle what there were no words for, the inexpressive. So we connected as much as we could, and she was always kind of she's a little like a cat, because, you know, cats are so independent, right? You know? Right. And I mean, they cuddle up to you, but they go their own way. They have their own, you know. So she was always that way. You know, she was an introvert, even though she was outwardly, you know, available. Right. So all those things saved her. Yeah. And because I knew she was safe inside, even though it was hard for me, of course, caregiver, I knew that she was safe inside, and that, you know, so it was just me trying to negotiate how I needed to be, and there wasn't enough support. I went to an Alzheimer's support group that, a local Los Angeles Alzheimer's support group, and spoke out as a lesbian, because there is not much support within those Alzheimer's support groups for LGBTQ people. At least I wasn't at the time. And I spoke And I spoke about that because, you know, the personal is political. An early feminist.
Of course.
Right? Personal is political. That was political. And it was also very personal to talk about that relationship else on the support group.
Yeah. And to be in a safe space to do that and to feel comfortable.
Safe.
Right. Yeah. 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 Well, let me ask you about this. One of the things that moved me, and actually, I mean, I was stunned. The incident with Babatunde Olatunji, the fact that the young woman wanted to drum, Lynn Huckabee, right, wanted to drum. He said, and you know, and anybody in the drumming world knows, Olatunji is the pinnacle of drummers. And for her to tell him that if Lynn could not drum, he didn't need to come back because her space was open to everyone. I mean, she challenged him, you know, in a way that, you know, you don't really see that. You didn't see it back then. And even now, really, people defer, you know, especially in the Pan-African community, there's a lot of deference when it comes to the men.
Yes.
If the men say, you know, it's done, there's not a lot of challenging. So I thought that really spoke to who she was at that time period, to fight for the girl.
Right.
Early on.
Yeah, I'm so glad you appreciate that, because I don't think people, first of all, I don't think people who are white who really understand who he was and how he was in the community, what role and place of position and how
the father
team that he had.
Mm-hmm.
To really appreciate how she knew she was right. I'm saying she trusted her voice.
She did trust her
voice. And she was fighting for herself and for the girls. And she wasn't part of a feminist movement. She comes from a strong line of women. But when I met her, she had just been discovering feminism for herself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She's always a feminist, but she, you know, but that's who she was.
Yes, spiritually she was. Right. Intellectually, maybe it came later when she got the books and she was reading.
Yes.
But she knew early on, you know, because like I said, to challenge someone like Olatunji, that made me pause because and she, as your face shows.
Yeah, she was brave like that.
Absolutely.
Too, when she rescued these children from sexual abuse that she had, foster child and stepchild.
Yeah.
When her husband was not interested and kind of like afraid of it, and she went off and did it herself. You know, I mean, she taught. I think that one of the things I was always wondering, what the hell? How did you ever love me? And I think that she told me that she saw that I was brave.
Mm.
Well, she made me much braver. And, you know, it was something she wrote about Audre Lorde, that Audre Lorde always admitted that she was a coward. You know, she actually always talked about that, how Audre always talked of herself as a coward. You know, it was really Pat Parker who helped her to come out as a lesbian in public. You know, in an all-nighter, 24-hour all-nighter that they had together. And Audre admitted that. Angie was never a coward. She was out there doing stuff when she was in Europe. She was doing it when she was a kid. I don't know where her mother must have just, I can't even imagine what that mother was like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But she saw Angie, and Angie she was the bravest person I've ever known, really. I mean, there are a lot of brave people out there, and you see them all the time. But in terms of my personal experience, she's the bravest person that I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, one of the things that I really appreciated that you brought up in the film is when you talked about going to East Haven Beach and that experience of going to the beach, and how you framed it. You said you had a lot to learn about that time period because Dr. Bowen didn't want to go to the beach because she didn't feel that it was welcoming for Black Americans, right? And so even with all of your experience and being out in the world, race was something that there were things that you were unfamiliar with, right? And so today we call it privilege, right? Back then, right, it was about understanding how to navigate that. So could you talk about how she influenced you, even as far as that's concerned, as far as race is concerned, and identifying yourself, you know, because I love when I read on your website, and you said, you referred to yourself as, you said you did a racial description, which I loved, and that I don't see that often. You said white, Jewish, lesbian, feminist. And you don't see that a lot. The identifiers, you know, being so clear. So could you tell me a little bit about how that experience about East Haven and just understanding what that felt like for your partner to not feel comfortable, how that helped shape your life and change you?
Well, it was an ongoing healing.
Yeah.
It's an onion. Racism is an onion.
It is.
Because, you know, it's the pain of it all is just the wounds of it, the pain of it. You know, why are so many Black folk dying of this and that and whatever? Well, you know, there's a lot of arrows that come in without actually puncturing the skin.
Yes.
And so to observe that, to observe what made me want to get a gun, you know, a lawyer, something, you know, when it happened, I was like, you know, Papa Bear, Mama Bear, you know, what you doing to my woman?
Yeah.
And so, but it took time for me to recognize that crust of protection that privilege allows you to have, to not see, to not feel. But when you love somebody who is of another difference, and there are many differences, disabled, no color, body type, you know, I mean, there's so many differences. When you see the pain inflicted because of the body type and the skin type, you know, or the class type, it is so painful. It's so painful. And it makes me so angry that my white brothers and sisters don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so, but it takes love, I think, to see it. I mean, I think that's what it does, is that you have to love somebody who's really different from you, to be able to, and hear what their stories are in order for you to appreciate what you don't know, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it. So it's affected my poetry. It affected everything that I chose to do in terms as a filmmaker. I chose what I did as a teacher, you know, and it affected my total being, and it still does to this day. I've got a stepdaughter that I love and a stepson that I love, and you know, how would I have ever known what it was like to be a mother with a Black son if I hadn't been with a woman and watched him grow from 12 years old to the 50-year-old man that he is today? If I hadn't been that upfront close, there's no way. You know, it's just no way. So, you know, I'm just delighted with the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, it's finally. I don't want who was there before us. I don't want the footprints that were laid down before they got here to be erased. And I think that the historical perspective, and I want Angela to be part of that. I want Audre to be part of that. You know, I want them to be part of that. And I kind of see myself now as someone who helps to, you know, extend her legacy, or even bring it as much as I can to the fore, and have, you know, ZAMI NOBLA, I don't know how
Nobla, yes.
I mean, Nobla. The Women's Suite on Women be showing Angela's film in 2021 means a tremendous amount to me. And having you interview me and having me able to talk to you you know, it just means there's no way to describe what that feels like for me. You know, it's really great. You know,
no, it's
talking across these vast differences but we share so much in common because we do. But there are differences as well.
Right.
But that you're interviewing me as a white feminist, as a white lesbian, as a white Jew, talking in a women suite on women Black lesbian film festival, speaks volumes to the capacity for what it means for inclusion, and it gives me hope.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for saying that, and I think the important thing to do, and it brings me right to something that Dr. Bowen spoke about, which is about finding your allies. And I think one of the things that we don't do often enough is we don't reach across the table, right? So someone may not look like us. They may not be from where we're from. They may not have the same faith, or they may have no faith. And that's fine too. But we have to be willing to acknowledge our differences, but not let those differences keep us apart. Because the only way
to grow from them and
to grow from them,
to expand ourselves and our world.
Right. She spoke a lot. I saw you had listed all these institutions. She was busy, right? University of Virginia, University of New Hampshire, Smith College, MIT, Tufts, Yale.
Harvard.
So she was, Harvard. So she was all around speaking. What was she speaking about in particular? Let me ask you that.
All of what we've been talking about.
Okay.
Black, lesbian, feminism, working across our differences.
Yes.
We do that, challenging racism, trying to bring the cultural giants that she read about and have inspired to her, working that into her her speeches. Audre Lorde, Bayard Rustin, all those people. She skillfully managed to educate and try to bring more people into the fold, so that the words that she was speaking that were not heard very widely, but were being heard those words are being amplified much more. The young Black women who are now in all kinds of positions in the university, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
That documentary I saw on PBS where the young Black women, well, for young, everything's relative. We're talking about, the role, the experience of Black women and Blacks in the industry. Diane, you've seen that one on oh my God.
What is it called?
It's called How It Feels to Be Free.
No.
It's called How It Feels to Be Free, which of course is after the Nina Simone song.
Nina Simone, I was going to say, yeah.
It's directed by a Black woman whose name I can't remember. And it was based on a book that was written by a Jewish woman about how Blacks were treated in the industry. So Diane Carroll is interviewed, some of the, and we were talking, and the questions were significantly rich and deep. Yeah. And I was like, I wrote something about it. I couldn't even watch the whole thing. I was so moved and so excited to see this being on there. It's called How It Feels to Be Free. It's a documentary, and I recommend it to everybody. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I definitely will look it up. Yeah.
It makes me want to write. And I wrote something and I thought, maybe I should write about what I felt when I saw it. Because one of the songs I sang in the rock band was Nina Simone, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free.
Right.
And it took me 50 years to be able to get my own version of it, because I've lived enough to know that I can sing that song. Right.
So tell me about your next projects. What are you working on? You mentioned Spelman College. What are you doing there? Tell us about that.
So there's a journal called the International Journal of Women's Studies. It's been around for about 25 years. And Diana Fox, who is the partner of Jomo Peters, who is my stepson, founded that journal. And she and Eva Wishi, who's a professor, and I always forget the name of the school, but she's a professor and was Angela's colleague at Cal State Long Beach.
Okay.
Smith, who is an archivist at Spelman College, and Beverly Guy-Chef-Tal, who has been enabling this thing to happen.
Okay.
creating a special journal issue devoted entirely to Angela Bowen's work.
Really?
Her essays, her speeches from all across her life. And so, because Spellman is going to get the archives, Angela's archives, I'm working on that, but also the New York Public Library, which has the largest collection of Black dance in the world, in the country. I don't know about the world, but they're taking Angela's dance archives. And so I'm working with an intern that's helping me to, get that information so I can send the dance stuff to the New York Public Library. And then we're working on this journal that will be available online internationally in September. So I'm doing that, and I'm working.
That's exciting.
It is. It's exciting. And so Benny, one of her students, is going to write, because he's a assistant professor now. Some of her former students, yeah, that's a big chunk of that, because I'm getting old. I want these things to get out of here before, it's buried under the house or something like that.
No.
So, and I'm working on I'm working on a first poetry manuscript, and so poetry is part of my life every single day now. And I'm trying to just survive, and like everybody else, and trying to recover and live with the absence of the person that was my my love. So that's a lot. That's a lot to do, don't you think?
It is a lot to do. It is a lot.
I want to eat. So.
Yeah, well, food is a great filler, literally.
Yeah, right.
Feeds our soul and our bellies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just, I'm so excited and thrilled that you are a part of this film festival. I think you are allowing future generations to know about her and about her life and about her work, and you are keeping her alive. This film will be seen again and again and again and again, and we don't know how many other people, right, are going to be inspired by her, by you, by the love that you shared. And it really is a love story. It really, really is. So I thank you for that, for showing us that love is possible. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, this has been great. I hope I haven't been too mushy and dramatic, but that's
no. It's. I mean,
I'm only talking about the most important thing in my life.
Of course. Let me ask you this in closing: what would you want this film to do? What is your dream for this film to be?
Oh, I want people to be so interested in her that they're going to go and dig up her papers, especially scholars, and to uncover the work that she did and the speeches and the writings that are so relevant today. You read this stuff and it's like, holy crap, it's so relevant today.
Yeah.
Let people be filled with her energy and her spirit, to work with her in scholarship as we research Black feminists, Black lesbian voices, visions of intercultural. How do you do that? How do you work with people across difference? How do you do that? How do you become an activist scholar or an activist artist? How do you do that? What do you need? I want people to know who she is, to read her work. I want people to realize that what she said is that you need to live, you have to live your life and live your dreams, but not for yourself alone.
Yeah.
And she always said, we need to move the line forward. That you just contribute what you can. You just move the line forward. So I want her to be part of the heroines, I guess. Part of the mothers, so to speak. Part of the ancestors that are encouraging you, the folks to name themselves, and not to forget whose footprints that they are stepping in. So I would like this film to be I remember having this film being introduced to, I think it was a Pan-African Film Festival. They did not accept it. They did not accept it probably because she was lesbian in Los Angeles, and she's here in California. So who hasn't allowed for this film to be seen as part of their film festival is very painful to me.
Yeah.
Because that homophobia, that feminism, that, against feminism, maybe because I'm a white director. I really don't know, because it's a good film. I mean, it was on PBS on, it's got all kinds of awards. It's a well done film. It's not it's not technically problematic. It's creative.
No, it's beautifully done. No, it's beautifully done.
So why is it that women are the only ones that are helping to let the film be seen? What happened to our Black brothers out there? We've got a foot in the door, all kinds of feet in the door. Why aren't they putting it into the film festivals that are heterosexual, they're Pan-African, that are nationalists? Why aren't they doing that? Are they only going to do, Cicely Tyson and Maya Angelou?
Right. No, it's true.
Why are we seeing the all three of the Audre Lorde films all over the PBS and whatever? And right, I'm glad there's 3 of our films about Audre Lorde. But what I'm saying is, I just think my question is, we are trying to lift an umbrella, and I don't know where our brothers are. I don't know where our allies are sometimes within the we think we should have allies. So I would like people to read her work. I'd like to have the film be shown in universities and high school. I'd love it to be seen in Roxbury.
Okay. Has it not been seen there?
It was at the Roxbury Film Festival a couple of years ago, but in Long Beach, California, at the university, there's I don't know, I'm not quite sure why. What are the reasons, So I just hope that if people love the film, that they carry it. Audre Lorde said to people at that I Am Your Sister conference, she says, especially talking to white women, you will be in rooms I will never be in. I took that charge. You will be in rooms I will never be in. Well, anybody who's coming to this film festival or sees any of these films that they're inspired by, whatever they do to help to make that be seen more or to share it with other people, and Audre Lorde always said, everything you do and everything I do matters. Because we're raised, I was raised to think that whatever I did didn't make any difference. You are, who are you?
Right.
And all of a sudden we're learning to say, well, whatever you do and what I do matters. And
it matters.
We take ourselves seriously. And you make a phone call, you write a letter, you spread the word, you send something on an email, you take a look at the webpage, you go to Women Make Movies, you share, in other words, whatever it is that we can do to help to let people know about it. Like Angie was an army for Audre Lorde. Well, we need armies.
We do. Well, I'm hoping that, through this film festival, which is, one of a kind, and hopefully we'll do more at some point, but through this kind of film festival, giving visibility to women like Dr. Bowen and yourself for putting this work out there, because it's important that these stories are chronicled. Hopefully we can do what Dr. Bowen wants us to do, which is what you said, move that line forward, right? So maybe that's what we'll do. Just in the spirit of her, we'll move the line forward.
This has been great.
This has been wonderful. You were wonderful. I look forward to seeing the film in Roxbury. Maybe they'll have a day for her. Maybe, there are ways that you can do things in the city hall and the offices. Maybe there can be a day for her.
I don't know. I always wanted to have the Bowen Peters School of Dance that brought Black art and to New Haven. There's a street name. They used to have a Bowen Peters Day when they were going to school, and acolytes from the mayor and stuff like that. But I don't think that history is even, And then Boston, she was in Roxbury with Elma Lewis. Well, I don't know how much, she was Alma's right-hand person. And
sure was, right.
Roxbury, and had these white teachers in Latin school and her English teacher who encouraged her. She she said that she took what she could from the people who gave her what she had. It was and then she gave it back all over the place.
She sure did.
Just gave it.
She poured it into, she filled her cup and then she filled others.
And I don't know how to do any of that stuff. You know, all I can say, that's what I would like to see her recognized as a foremother in both Boston and in Connecticut and right here at Cal State Long Beach.
Yeah, well, you know, we've put it, listen, I say we put it into the universe. I believe in the ancestors. You never know what may happen. I say we're going to move this line forward together, though. And
you're wonderful.
Oh, you're wonderful. And I thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart, from ZAMI NOBLA, for participating in this film festival. It has been a pleasure, beyond pleasure, to have this time with you. And thank you for making the space for us.